Hey everybody, I am back and I'm here to do a recap on Peter Jackson's Get Back. I originally didn't want to do one after each one. I just wanted to step back and take a kind of a wide view on the whole thing after watching it in its entirety. And a lot to unpack here. Wow. It was a great experience and I was really excited and a little nervous to watch it. And I didn't even watch them right away. I know people were watching them at like 3 in the morning. It took me a couple days to get to like the second and third one, but I did, and I just watched a couple of them twice as well because they were so riveting, and I missed a few things in the first go round. So I took some notes here, and then I took notes of my notes to do this video, and I'm just gonna give you a few things that hit me off the top of my head here, and just speak to them very briefly. I think maybe these could develop into some more talking points later on because there was so much that happened in this film. One of the pros of this film that Peter Jackson put together was that we got basically 8 hours worth of the sessions that really taught us more about them as humans, more of their camaraderie and their brotherhood, more of the problems that were going on there. We just got to know them better. And I don't know of any other thing in any part of their history did that. So really, we should come away from this period knowing the most about this period over any other period in their existence. And I do believe we did that. Let me see here. Oh, there's my heat kicking on. We'll have to do this. It's getting cold out. I'll just speak a little louder here. One of the things that I noticed, let's talk about understanding them better and understanding this time better. First of all, one of the things that I thought was great was seeing them work together so closely. Even amongst some of the angst that was happening during these sessions, I walked away with a feeling that was, first of all, completely normal in any working band condition, or even just working condition, any creative working condition, that is. But I also found a great camaraderie there. And if you paid attention to their dialogue, one of the things that I thought that was really fascinating was their constant allusions to their earlier part of their careers. This is one reason I thought that this overall film, this is a little tangent here, but unless you were a really pretty big Beatles fan, you weren't going to catch those at all. I think this film was not for the casual fan. That's one of the cons of this film. I'll get to that in a moment. But I really enjoyed all these little tidbits of allusions to the past. Let me just go through a few of them here that I took notes of. A lot of notes here, folks. Lots of notes. You know, there was Michael Lindsay Hogg was showing them draw-ups or mock-ups of what they did at Around the Beatles. They instantly knew what show that was, and they could speak to that show. There was talk of maybe possibly doing it the live show at the Cavern. That might have been just a joke, but they did mention the Cavern. And other people have mentioned that to me. Why didn't they do it at the Cavern? That seemed like it would be a good place to do the show. And I don't think they ever seriously considered it. One of the other things I heard in there, somebody said, Ringo forever, Eric never. A throwback to the old Pete Best days. You know, John, at one point late, this was at the Apple recording sessions, he says, I've had some wine. Remember Bob Wooler? The time when he beat up Bob Wooler on Paul's 21st birthday. So I thought that was hilarious. You know, they talk about the Litherton Town Hall show in December 1960. That was the return from Hamburg. And all this gets mentioned, even like Paul saying, hey, the rhythms and the guitars. So that kind of camaraderie and that was their own language. And really, I don't think anybody there hardly would know what they were talking about. We know, because we've studied these guys and it's been in the books and we pick up on that. But I'm sure a lot of people couldn't pick up on that. One other thing that struck me also was they had played a number of original songs from the early days that mostly Lennon and McCartney songs they never recorded. And having known the Niagara reels pretty well, I had known some of the songs. But they must have listed about a dozen songs, and some that were credited to Lennon, McCartney, Harrison, Starkey, one to Lennon, McCartney, Starkey, mostly Lennon, McCartney. But songs like Just Fun, Because I Love You So, that's when I knew, I Told You Before, You Wear Your Woman Out, song titles like that I wasn't really aware of. So I thought that was a lot of fun. Let's see what else here. I've mentioned, understanding this time period better and getting to know them better. And I think what we saw here, the camaraderie and what I call the brotherhood, I mean, there was times when this was some of the better parts of the film that Michael Lindsay Hogg caught here. I mean, the reputation of this time period precedes itself and really talks about how they hated each other. This is the breakup album. This was misery. Everything was negative. And that's clearly not the case. I mean, first of all, guys that do not like each other will not work on weekends to get this job done, a job that looked like it wasn't going anywhere, working hard to get it done, and then culminate at the end by playing in the cold live. And after they got done playing, they didn't just go home. They hung around and listened to the recordings. These are guys that give a shit. These are not guys that want out necessarily. Or I wouldn't say this is, there was strife there, clearly. But it was great to see these guys work through this adversity. And even the Paul and John discussion over the lunch in the canteen, where they're talking about George. And I don't think that they would have been talking like that and been as honest and open with each other about George if they didn't care, if they hated each other, if they were breaking up. They wouldn't have taken the time, they wouldn't have bothered. And the software that was used to enhance some of these recordings was just wonderful, because some of this I had never heard. I know the Niagara Reels pretty well. Done a series of videos on here, about, 8 or 9, that transcribe a lot of the talk, but seeing the video with it gives so much more information. And I was really amazed at some of that. That was really a treat for me. One of the other things that you never would have heard on the Niagara Reels is a point when, shortly after George had left, the breaking down for the day, and then the three Beatles kind of huddle in the background and do kind of this three-way hug, and you don't know what they're talking about, but to me it's a show of solidarity with the three, that they're going to probably get George back in and get this done and finish the job and be professional about it and be respectful about it. So that's what that says to me. And again, that is not a sign or a gesture of people that hate each other. So that was great to see. I mean, essentially, Jackson's film destroyed, and I shouldn't call it Jackson's film, I'm going to call it Lindsay Hogg's film, edited and reproduced by Peter Jackson, because Lindsay Hogg captured all this stuff. And some of the stuff wasn't really as audible, because in the day you didn't have the technology to make it audible for an audience, like in this type of setting, but it was done. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up here, I mentioned the reputation of this film, and I've been doing this now on YouTube. It's coming up on 2 years. In fact, it'll be 2 years in about 2 weeks. And since most of over half my content is Beatle content, you are up against being contacted by the most crazed Beatle maniacs out there. The conspiracy theorists, the unhinged, you get some nut jobs. You get some great comments as well. You get some great viewers. But the flat earth Beatle fans, the ones who will not take any new evidence and consider it to be worthy, that I've never seen so much evidence happen I've never seen so many people take that approach to this time period. They're so invested in the old narrative that this was all misery. So I took great delight in basically seeing a film that proved them all wrong. This film is not what they call a whitewash or a Disneyfication or a revisionism or revisionist of history, or Paul McCartney revising this. All those things were said to me. And I'm very happy to say to all of them that they could kiss my ass, because all the Niagara Reels describe that to be not true. And they didn't want to believe it. Some of them didn't want to believe it. You even have writers now poo-pooing this new thing. I don't know if you saw that Guardian article. That was rather interesting. But essentially, this so-called whitewash, which, well, if it's by Disney, it's going to be Disney. Well, you know what? This isn't a Disney film. This is an Apple and Peter Jackson film. I forget the name of his company. Disney's just the distributor, really. They're just the platform by which to stream. And for some reason, people, the naysayers, took the opportunity to jump on that as if they had something. They didn't have shit. Because basically all the stuff they said that was going to be whitewashed wasn't whitewashed. In fact, not only did all the things they thought were going to be censored, not only was that all brought out, but way more was brought out than even I expected. So that proves that this is as balanced of an account as you can give to these sessions. And I was thrilled to see that. Some of the censored stuff I'm talking about are, there was the argument between Paul and George, and that was shown pretty much in its entirety. And the thing that I thought was interesting, because I hadn't seen much of the video on that, some of it, but Paul stands up in the middle before it gets a little more heated and says, he's frustrated. He kind of walks and starts pacing and says, I don't know if I want to do this on camera. And John says, forget the candid camera. And then Paul lets loose and goes at George. And then George comes back. So this idea that the Beatles were playing to the cameras, or they knew the cameras were rolling, so they were behaving, is horseshit. And that proves it. Another one is, these guys were challenging each other quite a bit through the whole film. Sometimes it was gentle ribbing, sometimes not. But that was all left in there. We had the John Lennon heroin incident referred to as openly as you could. Now, the video that was the two junkies, as you may recall, that was not shown because I don't believe that was part of this filming. That was a separate interview by a separate filming company, which may have been CBS. So I don't think that video could be shown. But what was shown is the after effects of that, when John comes into where all the guys are sitting down. And what does he say? I got it written down here. Lennon's making a reference to recovering from the difficult last night. And he's kind of speaking openly here. And Paul goes, any need to do this in the public, Mr. Lennon? So that was left in there. And sharp people who understand what's going on and know the days kind of go, oh, that's right after this interview when John got sick from the effects of heroin, apparently. So that was left in. Obviously, George leaving, that was left in. There was people saying, oh, they're not going to show George leaving. The lunchroom discussion I mentioned earlier, that was pretty hardcore as far as showing some dirty laundry. That was left in. The mention of Alan Klein is brought in. There was bitchiness toward some of the people in there, especially toward George Martin. That was left in. You had the version of Get Back that mentions the Pakistanis in the Commonwealth version, which Jackson goes to great length to talk about how that was what was in the news and the Beatles were doing a parody of that. That was left in. There was a joke in there that said, one of the things I thought was very interesting was when George left after the fight, the confrontation with John, which we don't see because there's no audio or visual to support that. Although we know there was something that happened because people talked about it after the fact. But there was talk about them trading punches having been thrown because of an article that was written shortly after that. I think that's where that rumor began. Well, here we have, they're reading that article here at Apple, and they're so incensed, they're talking about suing. And that writer was Michael Housego. And both George and John were rather upset about that and wanted to sue. So one of the things that's interesting about these naysayers I keep bringing up is they say, well, John and George aren't here to talk. They aren't here to give their piece. Well, they kind of are. That's their piece. They said it at the time. And this has just been uncovered now for us to not only hear it, but see them say that. So we don't need them necessarily saying it in 2021. They said it back in 1969, and that pretty much puts that rumor to rest. And we had a few cuss words as well. There was talk about those not being put in. So this tells me, and I think Jackson, was well aware of some of the some of the potential ways that he would be whitewashing this. He was aware of that early on. And I don't know if how determined he was to not go that route, or he, to me, is a fan. And I think that I like seeing that stuff. I don't feel that it makes the Beatles look bad at all, really. It just makes them look like human beings. One of the things that, one of the cons of the Peter Jackson cut, is something I think I just alluded to with respect to Jackson being a big fan. One of the things I would say about this being almost 8 hours, I think it was too long. And I think Jackson, being a fan, maybe had a hard time separating himself from the subject matter. I know what it's like to, I've got a little bit of a film and video production background, and in shooting all the stuff, producing, writing a script, all that stuff, and you have all this wonderful footage that you want to use and you're close to it, but it's too long, you got to cut. And I didn't think he cut enough. I can see where he wanted to keep a lot in. We had so much humor in there. So much, it was all these little bits of fun sayings, clever sayings, and humor. And weaving that into the story takes a little bit of time to do and give context. So I think that's why he did that. And I'm not really faulting him too much for that, because I think even if it was a 6 hour total, I think that's even too much for casual Beatle fans. I think a casual Beatle fan, or somebody just coming in hearing the hype about this, would be satisfied with a 2.5 hour cut, which I think, is it worth doing that for them? Maybe, but I can't see many casual fans or less than that sitting through 8 hours. I think that's a lot to ask. And like I said earlier, they probably wouldn't have understood the in-jokes, the progression of some of these songs, who's this person, who's that person. It would be hard to put that all together over 8 hours. So what else we got here? The one thing I noticed, one other con that I wish he had done, was when the Beatles, John and Paul, they're doing two of us at the same microphone. This is at Twickenham, and they're kind of having fun at the microphone. And there's a longer cut of that. I've seen it in bootlegs, but that was just given a real maybe 10, 15 second look. And I would have liked to have seen that longer, because those two guys I like seeing John and Paul together at the microphone. I think that would have been the only time they were at the same mic for all those recordings. I may be wrong about that, but that's always cool to see. So we got 3 different sections here. Generally speaking, the Twickenham part 1, the thing I had a little problem with that was that there wasn't a lot of video that was synchronized to the audio. I really came in expecting more synchronization during the Twickenham, and I was most excited to see that part. One of the things I loved about it was that, from the camera's perspective anyway, you had this studio with the white wall background with the nice colorful gels warming it. So sometimes it looked wonderful. I loved it. Other times when the camera's off those backgrounds and you're just in the plain old studio, it looks incredibly dingy. So I can see where it was not the most pleasant place to be. We had the benefit of mostly being behind the camera, so it probably looked better to us. The Apple part, when they moved to Apple, I thought that was also fun. I expected that to be more upbeat, and certainly was. And the jokes kept coming, and John was way more involved then in taking more of a leadership role, which is great to see. And Billy Preston comes in, and Preston added that jolt that they came to Apple already in great spirits. Preston came a day later. That first day they were high in spirits. And they had smiles on their faces, and George Harrison says, "Oh, there's good vibes here." And they were just comfortable to be there, and you could tell that it was going to be on an upswing. And Preston just added to that. And finally, the rooftop. I was actually the least excited about that, but I was the most surprised when I saw it, because with Lindsay Hogg using 10 cameras and being able to utilize 2 on the street and a couple on the buildings, and doing the split screen I thought that was great. And the cops and with the camera inside the foyer of Apple. I mean, Lindsay Hogg did a wonderful job of camera placement for this rooftop scene. So we got to give Hogg some slack here. As you know, all through the whole month, he's talking about where's the live show going to be, where's the live show going to be, where's the live show going to be. This guy was ready for the live show. He knew wherever it was going to be, he could do it justice, and he did. The camera placement was wonderful. He had the handheld stuff going on, and just the cops. I thought that was just hilarious how they were just being given a bum steer. Oh yeah, I don't know, can't get a hold of them upstairs, or they just kept stalling as best they could. So I thought that was fun. It ended on such a good note, and even though we've seen the rooftop concert before, this was like seeing something completely new, and seeing a little bit of the chatter in between, just the end. And then at the end, they all go down and listen to it. So I thought, as I said, I thought Jackson would over-deliver on this, and I do feel he did. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but as far as a historical reference point in any band's career, this is just a high point and just, or a benchmark of any band that records themselves recording an album. So that's all I've got for now. I think I'm going to end it there. There is a lot to unpack here. I'm sure many of you will there's certain things that hit you. I'm not saying this is the end of my discussions on this topic. I think this could go on for a long time. I might take a little break here. I do have one more coming. It's an album that never was. It's based on these sessions, and it would be in addition to the 50th anniversary here. In the meantime, I've got some other videos coming up of a guest I had on recently, and I know you're going to enjoy her, so that's coming up soon here on Pop Goes the 60s.